folks are ready to carve out their own path in employment? And is this something that us as industry professionals, are we ready for that? Are we ready to accept that this new generation requires us to do more?
Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, it's Nikki back on Gut Plus Science, and today I am so pumped for this conversation. I'm just going to give you a little disclaimer. Alafia, Stewart, who is my guest today, and I have decided we are here to be bold and we are here to challenge us, the two of us, and all of you listening around really leading the newer generations of people in the workplace forward and what we really need to understand. There are so many big light bulb moments of opportunity in this conversation that we haven't even had yet, but I know is coming. And I am just so inspired by the conversation that I had with Alafia prior. And that's really going to kick off our conversation today. But let me tell you, she is a global diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. She is a subject matter expert in global government and nonprofit management, passionate about storytelling, particularly data-driven storytelling, and then has this heart for helping leaders understand the newer generations at work and how we truly lead them forward. And so today, we are talking about just that, leading the newer generations at work forward. And we're going to kick off with this bold thing. So Alafia, those younger people that are coming into the workplace, however they're working, they don't need us, the traditional leaders, the old way of working, if you will, unless we are changing to really become attractive for them. And I think that's the big light bulb moment is they don't need us. The traditional workplace, they can choose that, but it's not something that, they're going to have to just figure out how to, fit into this. That's just really not the case today. And I would love for you to elaborate on that "they don't need us" statement.
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on the People Forward Gut Plus Science podcast. My name is Alafia Stewart, and working with the newer generation is what I do and what I'm passionate about. And to piggyback off of what you were saying, they really don't need us. And without being too tongue-in-cheek, they are smarter, faster, and stronger than us. And I'll break that down. Smarter in that they have access to information at an all-time high, more information than ever in history. Faster than us because they're digital natives. They know how to leverage tech to their advantage. And I would say stronger than many of us because they are less allied to ways of thinking that promote staying in a toxic and or stagnant work environment. And that's them. They are taking names and pushing forward and creating the future culture of work on their own.
Oh, so true and so powerful, those three things: smarter, faster, stronger. And you just think about all of these different technologies that are, taking over our world. Let's just call it that. And they know how to leverage them and use them. And that is what is the smarter, faster, and much of this resilience that they've built up, and just like how crazy our world is right now, and that they have lived through this like the craziest times ever and are thriving. And before we go any further, Alafia, I would love for you to really bring some examples to the table on leaders that are listening and they're like, what do you mean they don't need us? Okay, for example, these are the things that they can do. They don't have to do the traditional workplace thing. Maybe just for some people that are like, what do you mean? What would they be doing then? Can you give us some of those examples?
Oh, absolutely. The newer generation of employees today intimately understand the power of personal branding. And what personal branding could look like for an individual is very vast in this climate. We're talking about folks that can create platforms where they have sponsorship deals, where they are doing their own public talks. I've even seen this newer generation of folks take the leap and start consulting on things that they feel that they are subject matter experts at. So no longer are the days where you had to be 15, 20, 25 years in an industry to offer knowledge. They innately understand that they have something to give. And if it's something to give that is filling a void, they will try to fill it. And it's incredible to watch. Even starting their own e-commerce stores, not only do they have access to the information that could get them out of the traditional 9-to-5 mentality, they also have access to an array of things to help them get there or to experiment along their professional journey until something works.
So good. Thank you for sharing that. And for those of you listening that are like, okay, I can kind of see how that works. I mean, Amazon, you look, all of us use it, but there are ads that pop up all the time that say, create your own storefront. And then you see an example of somebody that's like, I'm 1 month in and I just cashed my $40,000 check. I might be being a little extreme there, but like those numbers are happening over time, maybe not just the first month, but it is like all of these platforms are giving opportunity for those that are smart and fast and strong to be able to just go ahead and jump in and try it. And they're not waiting for the hierarchy of like, but I advanced to the next level and I got to take another 10 years to become, they're just jumping in and doing it. And it's inspiring. I
Yeah.
love that.
It truly is. It truly is. And they're not waiting for our permission. They're not waiting for our expertise or our opinions on what it is that they can achieve. They are not afraid to fail early and fail often and to continue to find what works. And it's so admirable.
It is so admirable. So for some people that are like, who do they think they are? I'm like, yeah, who do they think they are? Like, that is awesome. Way to go. And inspiring those of us in the older generations, that they are moving many people forward inside of workplaces because they're just jumping out and trying things, which is like a total reframe from what a lot of the older generations thought was okay. And like you said, like not waiting for permission. So I love everything we're sharing. You are a lover of data, as we said a minute ago, and also this newer generation's thought leader, just really bringing this to the forefront, but also data driven. I'm curious about the trends that you're seeing around newer generations in the workplace.
Oh, absolutely. So newer generations, they are they are demanding and in really, really beautiful ways. They are demanding flexibility. They're demanding emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion because they want to belong. They want to be in an environment that they feel is healthy for them. They're looking for corporate commitments to sustainability and corporate social responsibility. They want to lend their labor to companies that care about the world and the communities in which they're in. They're also looking for things like mental health and well-being. They're looking for opportunities to innovate. Long gone are the days where someone would come into a company and just be okay where they are. They want to find upward mobility opportunities, leadership opportunities, mentorship opportunities. They want to get as much out of the workforce as the workforce gets from them.
I love that. The word that was coming to mind for me is this really workplace being holistic in how it supports our lives. And you led with that first kind of takeaway around flexibility. And then you were talking about like community and inclusion. And I think, it is so important that the old ways of seeing, I'm going to check in at whatever time and check out, and that's just like compartmentalized is no longer a thing. Like it should have been gone a long time ago, but with the newer generations coming in, it is, unless this fits my whole life, I'm not coming in for this to be a compartmentalized section of my life. I'm curious your thoughts on that, Alafia.
Absolutely. And they're looking for the work-life balance that many of us in the previous generations have longed for, have desired for, to have an opportunity to work, but work not be the way we identify ourselves. Young people or newer generations understand that work is folded into our identity and is not our identity. What we do, how we produce, how we make money is not our identity. So they're looking for opportunities that are in addition to the lives that they envision for themselves, not something that's going to take over the vision that they have for themselves.
You've mentioned a number of these things, what I'm going to tee you up to share here already. But I'm curious if you were to say, okay, we said we're going to be bold here. When it comes to leading, so much, everything is about what's in our mind, right? Like the eyes see what the mind believes. I really believe that, right? And so the mindset that we take as leaders in how we're leading our organizations and the people forward, that then filters out to everything else, how we think about it. And so I would love for you to talk about a couple of these key, like the mindset we really must take. It's really not optional. We've got to take this mindset in order to be the workplace that not only attracts the newer generation, but sees them want to stay and want to contribute with us.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be frank. I hope your viewership or your listenership is ready because it's either you get with the program or you get left behind. And that's a very strange place to be because that's also, this new century of thinking, this new idea of thinking in regards to how work fits into our lives. So if I could give any advice to industry leaders, CEOs about the future of work, I would say that the mindset has to shift in a way that embraces flexibility. Newer generations of workers and even the current climate are looking for flexibility in their schedule. They're looking for opportunities to work remotely. They're looking for opportunities to have a life alongside work. So what is your company doing to think about ways in which that they could be attractive in those ways? There also is a call to prioritize inclusiveness and equity and transparent and ethical leadership. The days where talking about your salary being taboo are gone. Newer generation employees are talking to each other. They are comparing notes. They want to know that they are being paid equitably for the positions that they hold and the expertise that they have. If your company is not doing what it needs to do in the background for processes and procedures that emphasize equity, this newer generation will not only not be attracted to this, but also if they do come into the fold, they are a lot more likely to be vocal about it. But what does that mean? Vocal in this new generation looks like social media. Okay. Long gone are the days where a company could operate and be doing things that are unethical and nobody says anything. So, when thinking about this newer generation, also think about the agency that they bring with them to call out negative practices within your company. Now, of course, there are opportunities there to collaborate to address them, but just understand that these young people are coming with a foundation to stand on that says, hey, I don't think that this is right. And also, hey, why do you all think this is right? So being ready is one of the best ways to get ahead of that because you've already done the work to equitize the way in which you work in the background so that you're an attractive option for the next generations. Something else is that I don't think that this mind shift change is as hard as it's being made out to be as long as leadership teams have the capacity to have and to grow cognitive compassion and empathy. Are you working towards creating a workplace that your children, relatives, and other folks of this next generation that they would want to work? You could even think back to when you entered the workforce. What kind of workforce did you anticipate? What did you hope for? Do you even remember that time? Maybe it's a good thing to revisit and remember who you were when you entered the workforce and what you desired out of your professional career, because that might be a huge opportunity to learn from who you were to inform how you move forward.
So much here. And I've got some biggies, and this is where we're just gonna go deep here and really hit them on the head when it comes to flexibility and that being so important for people today. And that should be super important because we have a whole life to live. We have many different hats that we wear, and work isn't everything. It's not like, oh, just sit here and grind it out and, like eliminate your vacation days if you didn't get your stuff done. It's like, okay, can we have an and conversation? Let's meet in the middle on this, right? And we need all of it. And I think that you had said something earlier about leaders doing the work, or you said something like we have to do the work. I think I'll give you a simple example and then we'll get here on the flexibility. You know, with COVID, all of us had to start to embrace virtual ways of work. And people would say, "Oh, you can't do powerful meetings on a virtual platform," or people don't want to go to events if they're virtual. People don't stay engaged. They don't keep their camera on, whatever those things are. Well, you have to re-engineer it. You got to do it completely different because I have seen people do amazing events, amazing meetings, work globally with people on screens all the time and have very high engaging interactions. You have to rethink it and you have to do it different. And so when we think about, the old school days of like command and control. You got to, check in at your desk and you got a manager walking around, like making sure that you're there, whatever, because you're just trying to control that they're just doing the things and checking in. Okay. This is the best thing that I've learned is that we re-engineered to talk about the results that the person is responsible for with real, like true clarity of the role and these key goals. And we are leading them towards the results and however the heck they get it done with their smart, fast selves and being efficient. Great. Like let's lead them to empower them to do it their way. We know the result, but this is not we're going to make sure we're checking on the time spent, right? And monitoring that. So that's my first point that I want to hear about when it comes to flexibility. It's like, what else have you learned about really how do we do that? And we have to do it different. We have to lead it different in order for it to be a thing.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off of what you're saying, I mean, policies, processes, procedure over personalities and people. If you have the systems in place to be able to monitor, to be able to engage your employees around the end result, then that is more reliable than whomever is assuming the role, no matter what generation. So, in emphasizing the systems, you're able to get your results. And I love how you talked about the results, the objective, that being the thing to be worked towards. Because when there is a clear goal and objective, reverse engineering is easy peasy because you know what the result is that you want. And then that reverse engineering process from where you stand today, why not ask for some creativity? Why not leave the floor open for some innovation? Because that's something else that comes with this newer generation, these digital natives, is innovation. They are, at least in my experience, they are much more likely to bring innovation to you than the opposite.
So true. And I've seen it on my team lived out where when we empower people with the ownership of their role and we know what the results are and we're going to work on those together and they get to be creative and innovative on how they get there, dang, we learn so much. And that brings me to my deeper soapbox here, I think, which is around when you said practicing transparency and, the hidden financials. And we talked about like tenure not being what holds us from being able to just do the thing, right? All of that. I'm going to call that ego. I'm going to call that corporate ego stuff. And I think that it is just time that we hit that on the head. And I think it's all under that bucket. I'm curious when you think of like corporate ego or ego issues really being a lot of the core of this stuff it's no longer going to be a thing. Just, I'm curious about your thoughts there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are some industries that are not only listening, but doing something about it, even in the way that they engage with the workforce now. I'll give you an example. Recently, I saw Pinterest's assistantship program, and they are making an emphasis that they were looking for non-traditional candidates for these roles. And that's something else. Not only do these newer generation of employees understand their own agency, they're also questioning the value of certain academic certifications. Yeah, going to a 4-year college, does that resonate with the employment future that I want to have? Do I need it? And so since things like a bachelor's degree were something that were like, okay, we'll just have this at a baseline, companies are cutting themselves off from an entire pool of talented, resourceful people, and it's hurting them. So there are things that we can do, just generally speaking, in the employment arena that not only benefits companies for the future generations of work, but also benefits us right now so that we're also able to tap into these untapped talent pools. And it's something that is growing in popularity. For a while, we didn't used to see work-based training and learning as much as we did previously with apprenticeships and assistantships, but we're seeing a resurgence of that. And they're being sought out by newer generation folks. Like, yes, I might have all of this theory from my classwork and my academics, but they're noticing that you could go to school and attain your degree and have no opportunities and outcomes because of it. Now you don't have the experience related to the academic pursuit that would put you as a competitive candidate. And that's something that is very sad for this generation, but also very challenging for us because it gives us an opportunity to say, well, hey, let's do things different. We don't want to cut ourselves off from talent. We don't want to cut ourselves off from having innovators on our team. Let's look at some different models and different ways in which we can attract future employees. And so there's that as well. There are so many things that are challenging us to get rid of the good old boy system, to get rid of the only way for you to get these coveted positions are through networking. Folks are ready to carve out their own path in employment. And is this something that us as industry professionals, are we ready for that? Are we ready to accept that this new generation requires us to do more? And it is not about control. Silent quitting is a very real thing. Has your company done any analysis as to what's happening? Do you see a generational trend in the folks that are leaving? Because there are so many elements that could be addressed to keep that from happening.
I think it boils down to the humans on this planet that lean into the core of all of this being meaning and impact rather than all the stuff that we get wrapped up in that it's like, why? Like, why do we do it that way? And I will have to call out for a second. It's like, us as humans going through something governmental process, typically it's like, wow, there's 12 steps, but I could see how this could be two. But it's because it's just always been, and the 12 steps might have come down from 15 steps over the past 10 years, but it's like, no more of that. Just can we get to, we want to live this life that we have in the loudest, boldest, best version of ourselves, whatever you want to call that. And we want to be able to use our time wisely and stop checking the box, like, and truly making impact. And it's really what I'm hearing through all of this is we're eliminating the crap, like cutting the fat and just getting to meaning and impact. And, earlier when you were talking about flexibility and I shared the examples about, the transition from live in person to virtual. And it's like, it has to be re-engineered, just like, the end results of what we're going for. Let's go for that. And then what's the new process? I think it's looking from that lens throughout everything that we're leading forward. And why? Why are we doing it this way? What's the why? If we're going for our mission and purpose as a company and helping these people have a great work experience, most of that other stuff we've done in the past can probably just get eliminated. Let's just focus on those things and then work backwards. So much of it is this re-engineering thing.
Absolutely. And I'll give you an example. So I work for the Melton Foundation, and we have been virtual since 1991.
That's
So we
awesome.
have, since our inception, we have always been virtual. And even for us, when COVID happened, we had to re-engineer what we were already doing virtually to be more engaging, to place an emphasis on having interactivity during our sessions, to have events that we're building towards that utilize the influencers that we have on our teams, that invite guest speakers that the community has voted for. Like, there are ways in which any company can re-engineer what they do digitally to mimic as closely as possible to what could happen in person, but there has to be a desire to do so. Don't write it off. Invest in it and investigate what your audience wants to see, what your employees want to do and be a part of, while keeping your main focus and objectives there. But let's figure out ways in which we can bring the digital to the native digital generation.
So good. I know when we talked before, you had mentioned the importance of a clear articulation of the investment into that individual, into the people that we are leading. What do you mean by that?
It means that performative practices must end. This generation demands transparency and investment. Can your company clearly articulate how it invests in the individual? Can it clearly articulate the systems that it has in place for growth, the DEI systems that it has in place? Are you all utilizing blind recruitment? Are you utilizing having comprehensive onboarding programs where DEI is something from the onset and setting the tone for belonging for an individual coming into your company? Are you guys doing collaborations with ERGs to see what your standing is in regards to your sustainability on this planet? Have you done your evaluation of accessibility? And with the onset of more need for digital platforms, digital access, what are we doing about our well being? And what are we doing about community engagement? Because that's something that, and I don't know how to say this without it sounding just a tiny bit cutting. Our newer generation, our digital natives, our newer generations of employees are coming from this environment of tech. But at the same time, with the onset of technologies, we're seeing some soft skills that are dropping. We're seeing some soft skills that need some reemphasis. And so then it even places more responsibility on a workplace to create senses of community, create senses of engagement and inclusion and belonging, and do those things in a way that is clear and transparent.
All of it. I feel like we could talk forever. Before we head over to our lightning round, I just want both of us to touch on, just we've hit on a lot, and I think that this big light bulb that we kicked off with, and I'm so glad we did, which is they don't have to work in this traditional environment. There's so many different options. We must adapt and learn what it is that is most needed and wanted for us to be able to attract the newer generations of workers. And they are sharp. They are fast. They are leaning into believing in themselves more than any other, generation has. And we have to embrace that and really let go of the old school ways, which is however we want to think about it. I just don't have any better way of saying it's so much of that corporate ego that we have to unlearn. And then finally, for just the challenges I want to make today is around the why, the meaning, the impact. That's the center. And we re engineer the experiences based on that, whether that be for how our workplace does what we do, like across the board, or one on one relationships. We have to know their why, the meaning that's in it for them. And as a direct leader, be tapping into that at all times to be able to truly drive that outcome together that we are both looking for. It is so different than the ways of the past. What am I missing that's on your mind, Alafia, for just the biggest takeaways from today's conversation?
Yeah, for me, I would really want to say that the change is happening whether we want it to or not. So, what do you do with that? What do you do with the knowing that the future is coming? It's nonstop, it's changing, it has always been such. So, how are you being agile and reflexive in your role to the coming generations? We can no longer think about life in this quarter of the fiscal year. We can plan that way, but we can't live that way. There have to be future goals that think about what the organization desires to become and personify it. It's like we talk about brands and things like that and our relationship to brands and to companies. But if you were to think about your company as an entity, what would be its avatar? Would you be friends with it? So these are the kinds of lower touch questions that we can be asking ourselves about how we can co-create the future of work with the people that are going to be a part of the future of work.
Mm. You just mic dropped on that company avatar thing. And would we be friends with it? That is solid. I love that, my friend. Well, we're going to head over to our lightning round where we get to learn. I get to learn. And then everyone, through these questions gets to learn a little bit more about you. It's really relationship building time. And the first question that I love to ask, and we've been asking this for almost 7 years. So we have this big, long list. There are some duplicates on there, but we love to know your favorite book of all time or favorite recent read.
So for me, both are the same thing. So I am reading Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler for the fifth time now. And Parable of the Sower it was written in 1993 and it's like speculative fiction in a post-apocalyptic Earth that is heavily affected by climate change and social inequality. And so some elements of what I see in this book in the 5 times that I've read this, I see in our everyday life. So here's this science fiction from 1993 that we can even see elements of today in modern times right now. And so it's one of my favorite books. I cannot recommend it enough. It is in a series. So once you start with Parable of the Sower, please move on to Parable of the Talents.
This is fascinating, first of all. And then I am inspired because you've read it now 5 times. So it makes me think definitely a book that we need to pick up. Thank you for sharing that. And Alafia, I heard that you have a passion for foster care. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So in my personal history, I went from babysitting for a week to now 4 years later being the very happy foster to adoptive mother of a relative. And so foster care and the foster system are very near and dear to my heart. I believe that the systems in place in foster care and adoption need overhauling. There needs to be much more structural emphasis on keeping families together. I'll give you a little bit of an example of the discrepancy. To be candid, the foster care system as it stands views you taking care of a family member as being you're doing your family a favor. And so the amount of monetary supplements that are given to non-relatives of a foster care child is significantly higher than to relatives of a child. And why is that? When we think about where these children are coming from, they're coming from environments that have been financially strapped. Some of them come from environments where addiction and other poverty related issues are the premise as to which why they're in the foster care system. So why would this same system create a disadvantage for family members, but create an advantage for families that are not related to this child? It doesn't make sense. If the already vulnerable families had the same access to resources that the foster care system is willing to give non-relatives, we would have more children that stay in their families of origin.
You're such a change maker. Gosh, just across the board. It's awesome. And the theme in all of this and your foster care examples and just the passion that we hear through your voice is why? But why? Why are we doing it this way? If people would just sit down and look at, but why are we doing it this way? I mean, you can clearly see, duh. Like, it's just people don't stop to look at, like, let's reflect and look at this and how do we make it better? It's like a kind of simple thing, right? I think we all need to think through that as a takeaway today is just, okay, if we just sat and looked at, but why? And then there's probably a way to sharpen when we do that. So thank you so much for sharing that passion. And I did not know that. And I'm glad I do now. That's an important thing that needs changed. Okay. Now, my next question is around bucket list. So I heard that you checked a big thing off your bucket list a while back ago, living in Japan for 2 years. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So unfortunately, when I was 17, we had a home fire and my sister passed away. And Japan was the place that she wanted to be. She wanted to be from the land of the rising sun. She was very much into Japanese fairy tales, folk tales, music, food. And so I grew up with her admiring this place. And in 2008, many of us remember what 2008 was like, especially in the employment front. And one of the most viable opportunities for me to make a living was to teach overseas in Japan, working for the Japanese government as a teaching assistant. And I did that for 2 years in it's not a village per se, but close to it, a fishing village in one of the southern islands of Japan. And it was probably one of the most character building eras of my life because I was alone. I did not speak the language, but I knew that I wanted to be there. And it made me feel particularly special to be there and grateful to be there because I was able to check off a bucket list item for my sister. And then it became a bucket list item for me as well.
That is just so touching to hear that. Wow. All of what you just shared as to just the why behind it and what happened to you, in your teenage years, and then what you got to do to live out this bucket list and very special to your sister. Wow. That's just so cool. I feel like I would want to talk to you for an hour more about that. Wow. Real quick before we wrap up here and we make sure we get the best way to connect with you after the show, what's one bucket list thing that's in the works right now for you?
Oh, bucket list thing that is in the works for me right now is going abroad again to raise my relative in a different environment and enrich her opportunities. Before moving to Japan, I never thought that I would not only desire or have the opportunity to live in a different country And as I've gotten older, I've seen just how much that enriched me. And I want to be able to give that enrichment to my child. And so I'm excited about that bucket list item. It's in the works. It has not been completed yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to live abroad again and to work abroad and to really be a part of an international community.
That is so cool. And it just reminds me how powerful travel is as a teacher for us in so many facets that could be a whole nother episode as well. But getting outside of what we see every day and where we operate, it just really everything from curiosity to our perspective changing to just learning how other people live and what they value. It is so important. I cannot wait to hear where you go and when you go and how all that is for you as your next check off the bucket list. It's so cool. Well, Alafia, thank you so much for joining. Before we go, can you let everyone know the best way to connect with you to stay in touch or ask a question or whatever?
Absolutely. So I offer consulting to industry leaders that are a no nonsense bunch. So that is who I work with. The people that really, really want to do the work and they're not afraid of what the work could look like. They're not afraid of the extra effort. They're not afraid of dissecting their who's, their whys, and their hows to create the kind of workplace that anyone would want to be at. So my website is heyalafia.com. I can also be contacted through the Melton Foundation. The Melton Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit that is in social impact work. We work across 63 different countries doing social impact work, and that's impacting the communities for sustainable, positive outcomes, be it environmental, social. Right now, I'll give you an example. We're working with one of our fellowship projects. It's called Life Lifters Kenya, and it is a girls' scholarship fund that is building towards a women empowerment center in Kenya. And if you're paying attention to the politics in Kenya right now, all eyes are on Kenya as things are looking pretty interesting politically. And so we are the supporters for our fellows to make the impact that they seek to make in their local communities and bring it together in global cohorts so that we can amplify the work that they're doing. And so if your company is looking to strategically invest in social impact, check out the Melton Foundation. Please email me. I would love to connect you to young people, this newer generation that is doing the work to create a better world.
Alafia, it was so great spending time with you today and just really challenging all of us to think about the newer generations that are coming into the workplace and what is really needed so that we can truly lead them forward in a meaningful way. I think the first takeaway that just leans into the work you do with the Melton Foundation is the importance of having corporate social responsibility or philanthropic efforts tied to the work that we're doing, serving the greater good of this world. It's so important to the younger generations. And I think a core piece of all of this is the meaning behind the businesses that we have. When our products and services do great work, that's amazing. On top of that, how are we leveraging this business for good? The second thing that I would say is a really strong key takeaway, and we hit it on the head from the very beginning of our conversation, is the younger generations don't have to pick our traditional work environments because there's so many opportunities. And just the realization that we have to create workplaces that are much different, catering to different ways of thinking, the smarter, faster, stronger people that Alafia spoke of. So it's really important just to know that our traditional work environments aren't a box to then put people into. We have to expand that and find out how we really attract them based on, a win-win way. And number three, we must re-engineer our experiences based on the what's needed and wanted. What is the result? And rethinking about this from here's the end result. If the number one need is flexibility for the people in this generation, how do we re-engineer the way that we work in order to provide that? And we have to do the work to get creative to bring that to the table. I think there's just so much here and it's so important. And we have to get on board with figuring out how we attract and engage the younger generations that are smarter, faster, and stronger. And wow, what an asset to our companies. We'll see you next time. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.